So if you think, Will, like in your day-to-day activity, like what are some of the challenges you have? And maybe we can look into some of those challenges within Fleet. So what are some of the things that you do on a day-to-day basis, and how do you get data out of your devices?
Yeah, so the biggest thing is we need to have visibility into our devices. We need to know, who's all active, who's not active, if there's any software updates that aren't being applied, any potential vulnerabilities that our devices may have, and how those devices are affected, how we can remedy those software vulnerabilities. But in my day to day, I'm also pushing out new configs. So, especially on the Mac side, we're a heavy Mac shop. We're doing a lot of configuration profiles to either change the security settings of the device or just custom configuration profiles based on some new app or some new deployment that we're doing. The security side of the house, I wish I could have them here today. Sorry about that. But definitely, they like to have this data and have it exported. We do use some data aggregation tools that we have that we can, get the information we need from our current MDM. So if Fleet has something similar that we can pull all the data that what you mentioned OS Query is pulling in, that would be great.
Awesome. So first thing you mentioned was the vulnerability management and getting data out of the system, out of the endpoints that you have software running that you might not know what's actually running on those devices. And that's one of the kind of the free things out of the box Fleet gives you, is the ability to track all the software across all your devices. So you can see here in this report, I've got a list of all of the software that's running under the hood on OS Query. So OS Query is dynamically generating this list of software results. And then what we're doing is we're collecting EPSS scores, so from first.org, and we're aggregating that back into the software list and version of that software. And so you can see across all your devices who's running out-of-date versions of Dropbox, who's got a potential out-of-date GitHub desktop deployed, what version it's at. And then you can actually drill into that data a little bit deeper, right? You can see exactly, where this data or where these devices and software exist across your fleet. So if I, for example, take this Spectrum Protect client, actually it's not populated here. So let's drill into another software title. Let's go to a specific one. Let's call it, let's go to Firefox. Firefox has lots of vulnerabilities. Did I not search that correctly? No, I did not. Firefox. So you can see here, Firefox, it's a Debian. I think these potential device or potential software titles don't have any results because this is a staged demo environment. But the main way to get your data is to first search for the software and then correlate the number of hosts that have that particular software installed. So let's go to view all hosts here for the number of hosts that have the software. In this particular scenario, because it's a demo environment, we don't have all of the data exposed, but you'll be able to drill into the particular host that has that specific software installed on it. And then you can go into the software tab and then see, okay, what's vulnerable. In this particular case, you can see that there's a particular CVE for that device. And I can even go back to that device and add more filters. In this case, 1Password is one other piece of software that has vulnerabilities on that particular host. So getting software data and the correlating vulnerabilities across the software data is super important. One other aspect that I wanted to draw your attention to here was not just the vulnerability data, but let me just get into a software title that actually has EPSS scores. So this one, Thunderbird, which has 97% EPSS. We drill into that, you can see that there's also known exploit data. So we aggregate that data, not just EPSS score or the predicted or the potential probability of exploit, which is EPSS, but also if there's any known exploits out there in the wild. So that's one way that Fleet takes multiple data sources, aggregates them, and then presents it to you in an easy to kind of consume way. for understanding what your software vulnerabilities are. And so I guess I'd want to ask you, well, like what elements of taking this data out of Fleet do you feel like you mentioned that, you have some log aggregation sources, but, is this something that you could see that you'd want to export out of Fleet? And if so, how would you do that today?
Currently, we would just create manual exports. Either we have manual exports of the data using our current MDM, and we provide that to the appropriate teams. We also have some of that information being fed into a SIEM currently. But really, what we're lacking in and what we'd like to see something around is when we have these exports, if we can have some sort of automation. So like a ticket gets created, or if it's like an API based workflow that we can go ahead and have it take action when these are found.
That's awesome. And what you just kind of led me right into is the automations feature here. So you can generate a ticket automatically, and this will generate either a Jira ticket or a Zendesk ticket, and it will basically aggregate all of the data for all of the particular pieces of software that are affected. So in a vulnerability management perspective, give you all of the hosts that are that have a certain software with vulnerabilities on them in a single ticket. But if you wanted to just send this via webhook to another platform to consume, you'll get all of the hosts, and then you'll get the summary data of the CVE that's encountered, as well as the piece of software that's and version that's hitting that CVE. So that's one way to get this data. Well, multiple ways, but ultimately it's automations, right? So anything you can do in Fleet, you don't necessarily have to live in a UI. You can take this data, send it to other systems, and manage it within a REST API workflow. Or if you wanted to manage this outside of Fleet entirely in more of a CI type workflow, you can do this with Fleet Control.